Hello and welcome. My name is Megan Chen and I'm a speech and language therapist. Welcome to this video. This video is actually a follow-up to a previous video, why your 2 or 3-year-old has speech difficulty and how to help him or her. It has proven to be a very popular video. Thank you very much for your comments and discussion. So I thought I would like to address some of the concerns that were brought up and hopefully give parents more information so that you can take further action. You can recognize some of the terms that are used and understand what they mean, and you know enough not to get overly panicked when you don't need to be, yet you need to know when to take additional action when required. Okay? So I think a lot of people brought up concerns when a 2 or 3-year-old or maybe even older child is not talking, and other people might bring up the possibility of autism or ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorders. So let me start with that first, because I think that's one thing that parents are usually very worried about. First of all, what is autism? I think there are 3 main criteria typically for a child to be diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. One is speech and language difficulty. So they may be behind in terms of using speech and language to communicate with other children. Okay, they may be slower, they may not use as many words, or they may be restricted in how they use their words. So they may be very good at naming letters of the alphabet. They may be very good at naming animals, but they may not be so good at responding and answering questions or using language to express how they feel. Okay, so that's speech and language difficulty. The second area is more in the area of social interaction. Now, children can interact without using speech and language. When they are playing with other kids, for example, they may run around, share some toys, play the same toys together. And they don't really have to do that with speech, so they can still interact and play with other children. Okay, so when the child is having difficulty with social interaction, they may not know how to join in, or they prefer to play by themselves, or they're resistant to actually take turns in playing, and so forth. So the first one was speech and language difficulties, second area is social interaction, and the third area is what is called restricted repetitive behavior. I'll repeat that again, is restrictive repetitive behavior, or abbreviated to RRB. So as the name implies, the child may have a very restricted range of play. So they have only a few, rather than being interested in lots of different toys or games, they may be restricted to only a few. And they may play with a toy just in a very repetitive way, doing something over and over again, spinning it around, or banging it over and over, things like that. So those are the 3 main areas. In fact, the last one, RRB, or restricted repetitive behaviors, will be one of the most defining characteristics. If a child does not have RRB and is just having difficulties, or you could describe them as being socially awkward, not being very good at playing, it could be just due to sometimes cultural, environmental factors, like not having the exposure of playing with friends, or it could be due to a speech and language difficulty. Okay, what exactly are we talking about? One way to try to understand it better is to imagine it's literally like a child learning a foreign language. What happens when you go to a foreign country and you need to learn a foreign language? First of all, you need to know the vocabulary, what you call and how do you say train in a different language, how do you ask for the bathroom in a different language, and so forth. Okay, so after you learn a few words to express names of objects, maybe certain words, certain feelings, you need to move on. Maybe you want to express more complicated ideas, so you need to have a better grasp of the sentence structure. So maybe you need to learn phrases. You want to express ideas that, oh, I'm glad it's not raining anymore. Or you may want to ask, oh, do you have this in a different size? Different ideas like that. And then if you've really tried this out in a foreign country, you may have had the experience that you learn a few phrases, you learn a few words, and then you try them out, and all of a sudden somebody is speaking to you in a foreign language. Oh dear. So they go on and on, whatever, in Italian, Japanese, whatever, and then you realize the other aspect of language, which is what we call, receptive language, how you receive the language or understand the language, which is equally important. So very often, if a child doesn't really understand the language, let's say you ask them a question like, where did you see the dog? Okay, so you're asking about where, you're asking for a location, a place, but the child may only understand, dog. They only got the word dog. So what do they associate with dog? If they understand that it was a question, they may try to say something about dog back to you. So maybe a child has only learned that, oh, the dog goes woof woof. So you ask, where did you see the dog? And instead of telling you, in the playground, in the garden, they may say woof woof, because that's all they know to answer a question about dog. In other cases, a child may not actually know what to say at all. So you may get the case where when you ask a child a question and they don't respond, or they keep quiet, or sometimes they will repeat the question back to you, not because they are being autistic, but just because they don't understand the question. So it's more like a speech and language difficulty. Okay, so it's very important. It is not, I think the distinction is quite important, so that you know that if a child is having difficulties, is slow in picking up speech and language, it does not mean that the child is autistic. Okay, the converse is true. If a child may still have a diagnosis of autism, even though he or she may have speech. Okay, so they may be talking, but maybe they are not really using in a way to communicate what they want to do. They may repeat words just to label. Label meaning, okay, they know that this is called a tiger, this is an elephant, this is a lion, and so forth. Okay, so yeah. The other thing is to be aware that very often the responsiveness, sometimes even things like eye contact too, just comes from the fact that maybe a child is struggling to communicate, and they may find it difficult to multitask, between listening and paying attention to the question, or maybe while they're busy playing with a toy, they may find it hard to multitask and actually respond to questions. So again, you will find that when children with speech and language difficulties get intervention, they actually improve their speech and language skills. They're able to ask for what they want. Typically, you'll find that the responsiveness and the behavior will improve as well. So that's why I keep saying that diagnosis is really important. So do try to, anytime you're concerned, because as I brought up in the previous video, children are actually incredibly wired to learn speech and language. It's different from reading, for example. We expect that children have to be taught how to read, they have to learn how to read. But even children who have no exposure, no opportunities for schooling are expected to pick up speech and language, talk to other people, talk to their family, talk to their friends, and so forth. So when a child is having speech and language difficulties, you can see that there is a clear difference between how he or she communicates and peers. You do want to take note. You do want to see if there are things that you can do at an early stage. Speak to people, speak to the school teachers about your concerns, speak to your doctors, try to get a referral. Like I said, I'm sorry I can't really provide individual assessments over the video, so it's really important for you to follow up. And sometimes it's not even a case of getting a second opinion. You may be talking about getting a more updated opinion. So, if your child has seen a therapist some time ago, what was okay for a 1 or 2 year old may not be so okay if the child has not been really making progress, in that length of time. So when the child is older, 3 or 4, you may want to take your child for a second opinion, a more updated assessment if you find that that's necessary. Okay, so yeah, I think hopefully that answers some of your questions. I know that it's on the internet, it's easy to find lots of information, but sometimes hard to have your questions answered. So please, continue to send your questions and join the discussion. And hopefully I will try to make more videos too to try to help you. Thank you very much.